Hello, this is episode 3 of my 8-foot tall Thanos costume build. If you haven't seen the first 2 episodes, make sure you check those out first, otherwise you won't have much of a clue of what's been going on. And while you're doing other stuff, you may as well subscribe, hit the notification bell and give this video a thumbs up too. So, let's get started. So we're going to start off with the shoulders, as they're going to be easier than the helmet. We'll save that for last. So I've arranged this so it prints out on only 4 pieces of paper. So the first thing we're going to do is to join these up, so they're going to be really big pieces. Easiest way to do this is to print these on really crappy paper. Really crappy paper is usually quite thin, so you can see through it a lot easier than the more expensive stuff. So it makes lining up these little markings in the corner a lot easier. And it's as simple as follow the lines and cut them out carefully. I've laid these pieces down here with a gap in between them, and that is just to make it easier when it comes to assembling it. I'm only going to cut on the inside line of the big long piece rather than the fat piece, to make those two join up perfectly rather than try and have to squish them in together. So as you can see, I'm just cutting along the thin piece here rather than the other side of that blank grey bit of foam. I'm going to do the same thing for these little corner pieces. I'm just going to pin those in just to get the outside edge, but the inside cut won't be along this small piece, it will be along that big long piece, and then that'll give me a perfect fitting 2 pieces rather than having to manipulate it with heat and try and get something to fit that's not really designed to fit. Just marking all of these out of the back of a knife. If you use a Sharpie, you'll tend to find that that'll bleed through your paint. When cutting these, make sure you hold your knife as straight as possible. You don't want to get a bevel on an edge that shouldn't be beveled. So once you've got all your pieces, they should all perfectly fit together. But before we do, we're going to heat form them into shape first. So there's just a heat gun on the back of the pieces because you don't want to burn the surface that you want to paint. And then just bend that into shape. Just be careful because obviously the foam is going to be hot now. Now I'm pressing this down on one end and kind of squishing in the other end just to give it that tapered look. And I'm just going to pin this piece into place so I've got the edges lined up straight. And now working my way into the center. Gluing this now from the back. Good thing about doing this means you can pin together a really long seam and then hot glue it all in one go, rather than do a little bit, wait for it to set, do a little bit more, wait for it to set. You can get a big piece together in next to no time. Now I'm putting glue only on the top edge of this because it's got to be set back ever so slightly from the big curved piece you can see there, in a similar way to what the trim was a minute ago with the other piece. Just a little bit more heat there to curve that a little bit better so it closer matches the Peppercure file. Just got to be careful once you've glued it, too much heat will soften your hot glue and it'll fall apart. Now just scoring in some detail lines only about 1/3 of the way into the foam. That way when you put a bit of heat on them, it makes the foam shrink and those lines will open up. So just a little bit more heat and bending just to get those to the desired shape. And then of course you've got to make another one. And they were really easy. So now on to the helmet. So I've gone ahead and done exactly the same thing. Stuck them all pages together, cut them all out. So this bit here was supposed to be separated. I've just stuck that together just so there's one less seam. And that will, as it's so thin, the paper will lay nice and flat on the foam. And if it's not quite the right shape, as it's so thin, you better just bend that back to how it's supposed to be. So when laying these out, it's always best to try and maximise the foam you've got, so it costs less money. Now obviously you only get the parts for half the helmet, so you need to flip them over so they're upside down and then trace around them again, so that way you've got parts for the other side.
And just as before, cutting these out with a very, very sharp knife. You don't want the knife to be dragging through your foam and tearing it, especially as some of these bits are so thin. This bit here took a fair while to cut out. Just take your time, because if you go wrong and you cut a little bit too far, you're going to have to start this piece all over again. This piece was a separate part on the Peppercure file, but I decided to just cut it out of that bit there, just so it fits perfectly in the same way as I did with the shoulder pieces. I'm now tracing around those teeny tiny little pieces, and you can't cut those out in the same fashion, so instead I just cut slightly around them in like a rectangle and then just cut into them from the sides. So I'm gluing these to the center stripe down the helmet now, slightly set back because these two bits are going to be recessed. Just make sure you don't start the next bit until you're sure the glue is dry on the bit you've done. Otherwise you'll start sticking more bits on and bending it and handling it, and all your seams are going to bust open. Maybe not fall apart completely, but they won't look very tidy, so you need to take your time and only move on once you know your glue's set. You could of course use other types of glue for this. Contact adhesive works really well, as does super glue, but I find a glue gun I can work a lot quicker with. I don't have to sit there with all the pieces drying for a certain amount of time with the contact adhesive. And with super glue, oh man, if you get that on your fingers or it drips down your piece, then there's no way of getting that off really. So just gradually sticking the pieces together as per the Peppercure file. I've always got my laptop next to me open with that Peppercure Designer open with the file, so I can have a quick look back at that and make sure I stick the pieces together, because it's really difficult to unglue all of these things. And if you make a mistake, it's usually the easiest way to do it is to grab another piece of foam, get your template and cut out and start again, rather than try and fix what you've done wrong. So just heat bending these pieces. It's very important that you heat form these into shape first. If you just try gluing these in a curved shape, eventually, especially if you leave these somewhere hot, that glue is going to soften and the parts are just going to bust open. Whereas if they're already in a curved shape and you glue them together, there's no forces on those seams and they won't try to be tearing themselves open constantly. So this is taking shape rather nicely. Just got those two holes in the top there. So use these two templates here. These little darts that were cut out of this one, I've joined them together on the template to end up with a nice seamless piece to go over there. That bit of paper won't sit flat though, so you have to squish it down when you're drawing around it. And I've curved these bits of foam with a heat gun and they fit in there quite nicely. So this piece here is the outline of the trim piece. Now it needs to be beveled to be able to get that to angle inwards. So the easy way to do that is, before cutting out the inside piece, take a really sharp knife and cut that bevel into the edge. So I'm going to lay this over the edge of my table and then just cut an angle into it. So now you can see that it's got that angle on it, which will allow that to sit at the correct angle on the helmet. And I'm just going to cut around following the inside line of that. I did try cutting these out first and then putting the bevel in, but it was too hard to handle those and the knife was so close to my fingers I was scared I was going to cut my finger off. So cutting them out this way is a lot safer and a lot easier. Just gradually gluing those in, making sure that that edge is lined up correctly to get that angle. So just pinning this piece into the middle here before I go ahead and glue that from the inside. Now once you've glued all of this on the inside, it's only going to be like held in halfway. You then need to go back over these seams on the outside with your glue gun to kind of essentially fill in the cracks to make sure those pieces are good and strong. Now using a knife to score in some of the detail lines, and just as we did with the shoulders, going to go over these with a heat gun, and as you can see they open up as if by magic.
So here those parts all done. We've got the two shoulders here and they're both symmetrical, so it doesn't really matter which one's left or right. They were really easy to make. The helmet was a bit more fiddly getting all of these raised details raised the same all the way around was a bit of a pain, but got there in the end, and that'll look really cool once painted up. It is absolutely massive, as you can see. My head is tiny compared to Thanos's, which is kind of the point, because Thanos is going to be about 8 foot tall, which is about a third bigger than what I am. So I'm hoping that that equates to my head being the right size for his neck, because his head's going to be about here, and I'm hoping to hide my head in his neck. But we'll see how that works out when it comes to sticking it all together to make it wearable. But that's not going to be for a little while yet, because we've got lots more to build. So the next episode, we're going to be focusing on the torso, and it's absolutely ginormous. It's going to take a little while, but it's going to be really fun. So make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel to keep an eye out for that. Be sure to also check out the social media links in the description of this video. And also, while you're at it, why don't you go check out my Patreon campaign, and feel free to chuck some money my way so I can build some more cool stuff like this. And remember, you don't have to be great at making to make something great. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.